This is our first hearing of the second part of the 98th General Assembly. First thing we're going to do is call the roll.
Representative Franklin.
Here.
Representative Neely.
Here.
Representative Beard.
Here.
Representative Bratton.
Here.
Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Gannon.
Here.
Representative Haker. Representative Lauer.
Here.
Representative Meredith.
Here.
Representative Neely.
Here.
Representative Noor.
Here.
And Representative Reynolds.
Here.
All right, thank you. That's a quorum. Today we have gathered here together to get some updates from the department and to meet the new director. And we're going to go ahead and bring him up, Mr. Lyskowski. And first of all, I think we talked a little bit about in the hall. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the members of the committee for having me here today. My name is Peter Lyskowski, and I am the acting director of the Department of Health and Senior Services for Missouri. I'm a native of Jeff City, so I grew up in this town, and have worked in state government since 2003. I worked for the governor when he was Attorney General for the state. I was an assistant Attorney General in his office for 5 years or so, and then when he became governor, I began a series of different positions that I've held within the administration. Worked for 5 different departments and worked in the governor's office. And this is actually my second stint at the health department. And I'm pleased to be back here to have to answer any questions that you have and provide an update on what we've been doing.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction.
Sure.
Why don't you go ahead then with what you've prepared to provide to us.
I thought it might, in thinking about the hearing and what the members may want to hear from us, I thought it might be helpful to give an overview of where things stand with Planned Parenthood, the Columbia Clinic legally. And because it's been some time since I think this committee last met, and obviously you're all now back in town, just freshly starting the session. So wanted to just let you know, and some of this you may know, and I apologize if I'm being too repetitive. Feel free to cut me off. Okay. As many of you know, as saw in the media reports, at a point last fall, the university decided that it was going to do away with the privileges that were granted to the physician who was going to be staffing the Planned Parenthood clinic in Columbia. When the department learned about that decision, the department sent on September 25th a letter to Planned Parenthood saying, listen, this is a requirement in law that you have a doctor who has privileges. It looks like that is not going to be the case come December 1st. If that remains true, and if the privileges are rescinded, then we're going to be revoking the license to have an abortion clinic there. Let me back up a step and say that under Missouri law, an abortion facility has to be licensed as an ambulatory surgical center, and our department licenses ambulatory surgical centers. So we have not only statutes but regulations that govern the operation of those centers, and we also have some specific to abortion facilities. And of course, one of the requirements in law in several places is privileges. The doctor has to have privileges at a local hospital, basically. So 2 months passed, and we didn't hear anything formally from Planned Parenthood. We had seen in the news that they were trying to get either a doctor with privileges or to get privileges for the one doctor somewhere else, but we didn't hear anything substantive on that. So in November 25th, in fact, we sent another letter to Planned Parenthood saying, hey, look at December 1st is coming. We've heard nothing different about the university changing its mind or you all getting some other arrangement for privileges. And so you're going to be revoked effective December 1st. And we made plans to go in on December 1st, send our inspectors there to make sure that they take actually the paper license back and make sure that nothing was going on that they weren't authorized to do. Planned Parenthood sued the department in federal court on November 30th. And the federal judge that day held a telephone hearing and granted a temporary restraining order against our department, preventing us from pulling that license. And that restraining order was then extended on, that was a Monday. That Wednesday, the 2nd of December, the restraining order was extended to December 28th. And the judge held another hearing by telephone on the 18th. And then after hearing from both sides in the matter, she issued an order on the 28th, putting in place a preliminary injunction preventing the department from taking the license, effective until May 1st of 16. And she also said, basically, I want you all to come up with a schedule that will allow this case to be fully and finally adjudicated by May 1st of 16. So currently we are, the status quo is this. The department has been prevented by the judge from taking back the license from Planned Parenthood for the Columbia Clinic. What I do want to be clear about, though, is that because of something I said earlier, in Missouri law, you cannot perform abortions unless you're a doctor who has privileges within 30 miles of a hospital. And Planned Parenthood does not have a doctor in Columbia who has privileges within 30 miles of a hospital. So not only do they fail to meet the requirements for an ambulatory surgical center, but it is actually a crime to violate that provision of Missouri law in Chapter 188. There are, to our knowledge and based on Planned Parenthood's representations, no abortions occurring in Columbia as we speak, and nor have there been since December 1st, and nor will there be unless and until a doctor who has privileges in compliance with state laws is retained by the clinic. So as we sit here today, there are a couple different provisions of Missouri law that are preventing them from providing abortions at that facility. I just want to be abundantly clear about that being where we sit today. Do you want me to stop there and see if anybody has any questions or?
Sure. Yeah. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Brown.
To inquire. Okay, to summarize, I think what I heard you say is they still have their license, but they can't perform abortions. But any time between now and May the 1st, if they could get a doctor that had privileges, they would still start doing abortions.
That's correct, Representative Brown. We would, our staff would go in and do another inspection of the clinic just to make sure that some of the facility things or things like that have not changed. But that would be what Missouri law would dictate the results would be there.
Thank you.
Representative Neely.
Yes, to inquire, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Good morning. But, can you expand a little bit on these admitting privileges, what the current law actually states in Missouri in terms of, are there specific types of admitting privileges that this physician must have?
Yes. It gets kind of confusing, so forgive me. Under the criminal provision that I talked about in Chapter 188, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Representative Newman, is your mic on?
Now it is.
Okay, please repeat that.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you one more time, sorry. Can you expound on those admitting privileges, what current Missouri statute actually says, and actually in that statute that applies to all surgical centers?
Yes.
Okay, and just wanted you to expound on, it's not just complete admitting privilege, it's a little more specific.
Well, there are 3 different terms that are used, which creates some confusion. Under the criminal provision, a physician must have surgical privileges. And in fact, I have it with me. I'll get it out just so I make sure that you guys can get the appropriate citations to Missouri law. Under Section 188.080, I'm sorry, I said surgical. Here's what's confusing. Here's some of the confusion. The title of the statute, abortion performed by other than a physician with surgical privileges at a hospital, a felony. Okay, so you got that piece. Then you have another piece, and of course that's for somebody that's not applicable here. Any physician performing or inducing an abortion who does not have clinical privileges at a hospital within 30 miles, guilty of an A misdemeanor. So you have that provision. There is a provision then in the ambulatory surgical centers law, which is 197.215.1 paren 2. And that says that surgical procedures, which would include abortions, shall be performed only by physicians, dentists, or podiatrists who at the time are privileged to perform surgical procedures and at least one licensed hospital in the community. Okay, so that's what the ambulatory surgical center law says. So you've got clinical privileges under the criminal piece. You've got privilege to perform surgical procedures under the licensing scheme. And then you have also state regulations that the department promulgated many years ago for ambulatory surgical centers and specifically to abortion facilities that say physicians performing abortions at the facility shall have staff privileges at a hospital within 15-minute travel time of the facility. So you do have a bit of a confusing licensing or privileges scheme when you look at those three different provisions in the law, but those are the citations.
And next question, is there any other physician privileges or any other procedures that are as confusing as those that we currently have that you deal with in your department? Or is the law specifically talking about physicians performing abortions? Are there other privileges that the other physicians doing other types of procedures that are as that confusing in statute?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'll tell you this. The criminal piece, the criminal provision is only for abortions. And the regulatory thing that talks about 15 minutes and staff privileges is only for physicians performing abortions. The ambulatory surgical center law, that was the middle one that I told you about, just relates to surgical procedures, whether those are orthopedic, optometric, whatever.
So but basically what you're telling us that it's extremely confusing.
It's inconsistent, and I think the department has done a good job of trying to work with facilities and make sure that all the laws are complied with.
All right, thank you.
All right, are there other questions?
Thank you. Is there any other procedures that are considered surgical that are performed at women's health clinics or abortion clinics? Is there any other procedures that applies all these rules?
There certainly could be, yes, and would be, but I'll tell you, with respect to the Columbia facility, all they were licensed to do was medical abortions, not even surgical abortions, only medical abortions, those done with a pill.
Do they have the same?
Representative Moore, I'm going to ask you to use your microphone, please.
Oh, that's just what a thought. So there can be other procedures done at Columbia.
No. No, they couldn't do an ACL repair, they couldn't do LASIK, they couldn't do oral surgery. They were licensed by our department to do medical abortions only.
And they can't do that now.
And they can't do that now.
So they can't do breast exams or?
No, they can do that, that's not surgical.
Right, that's what I'm saying, non-surgical procedures could be.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Counseling for birth control, whatever, can still be done there.
Yeah, mammograms, pap smears, other non-surgical services can be provided. And they don't need a license for that, I should clarify. You know, a doctor's office that may have, mammography or doesn't have to have a license from our department.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are representative.
Do they do vasectomies or any sterilization procedures?
Dr. Neely, it shouldn't be because they're not licensed to do that. And we saw no evidence on inspection that they were going to be trying to do anything surgical.
Representative Meredith.
How about something like the cryosurgery? And I think it's cryosurgery where they freeze the
Freeze a mole off or something?
where there's, say they do a pap smear and they find that they're regular cells, and they do, I think they call it cryosurgery or something like that. Do they do that at Planned Parenthood?
I'm not aware if they do or not, and I don't know if that procedure would fall under the definition of what is surgery or not. I'd have to check on that.
Okay, because I thought it was called cryosurgery, but I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Representative Pratt.
Now, is this pretty common practice nationwide for requiring that within a few miles, they have to have privileges? I mean, this is pretty standard practice.
Representative, I don't know if I'd call it standard. I know a number of states have such a requirement. In fact, I believe it's Texas that has a case that's going to the U.S. Supreme Court over that issue. It's either Texas or Wisconsin. But so I don't know if I characterize it as standard. I do know that there are other states that have similar requirements to those.
Well, not so much on the Planned Parenthood. I'm just saying for any surgical center, I mean, to have privileges, within proximity of their location. That's already standard, correct?
Yes, I would agree with you that that is. If you're talking about all kinds of surgical procedures, yes.
Okay. And to have those removed, I mean, that's kind of a safety issue, correct, for that individual undergoing procedures? I mean,
Yes.
Okay. So the fact that this organization, regardless of who it is, I mean, this is for the safety now that they've been removed, correct? I mean, this isn't, if this were a LASIK eye center that had their privileges removed, I mean, the state would still do the same procedure, correct, of revoking licensure?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes.
All right. Good.
I know there was some question also about changes in policies or procedures that the department may have made in the wake of the last summer and fall's revelations. And the main thing that we've done in this regard is looking at the reports that come into the department. The department receives a report from a doctor who performs an abortion, and that has to come into the department within 45 days of the procedure, and it has to contain certain information. As we all have heard, and some of us know, the department also receives a pathology report from a pathologist that examines the tissue that is produced, if you will, in an abortion. And those reports are due to the department within 30 days of the pathological specimen coming to that laboratory. And what was discovered was that the department had not been receiving from St. Louis, from Planned Parenthood Clinic in St. Louis, their pathology lab had not been receiving reports. And so we have gotten in a number of reports, about 16,000 that came in September, October, that were going back several years to true up, because what's required is that the pathologist send, I think you know this, I think you had Dr. Miller here, the pathologist send the report both to the Department of Health and to the clinic or facility where the abortion was provided. And so what we have done is begun the process of matching up the reports that come in from the doctor who performed the abortion with the report that comes in from the pathologist on that same patient. And so we're about 80% finished with those efforts. And going forward, what we've been doing and are doing is creating a separate way to track and make sure that, because of these differing timeframes, 45 days for the abortion report, 30 days for the pathology report, and the fact that they don't have patient names or other specific identifiers other than a patient number, it's really hard to match those up. And so what we're doing is we have a system in place that's mostly computer driven, but unfortunately sometimes we do have to have human intervention in it to make sure that we're getting all the pathology reports that we're supposed to be. And so what we found is that, like I said, we're about 80% through it. We found abortion reports to match the vast majority of the we have found pathology reports to match the vast majority of the abortion reports that we've gotten in, and anticipate that we'll, upon completion of the project, we'll have that trued up, and certainly going forward are making sure that's trued up.
All right. And what did you find would be the best process then? Do you feel that this date, the two different dates, does that create a problem? Do you need that when the reports are due, do you need to do that? Or, what are some of the things that you feel would streamline? You certainly want this to be a more streamlined process.
Well, I don't think the dates are a huge problem. It just is, you just have to have a caveat that when you take a snapshot of, okay, for instance, how many abortion reports did we get in 2015? Well, that number is still provisional because any abortions that might have been performed, 45 days from the end of the calendar year or from today, we still may not have those in. So if you take a snapshot in time, you just have to have that caveat. But what we're doing is monthly going through and saying, okay, let's match everything up. And those that don't match, we do a manual review to see, is this just because the time hasn't run yet and it's not due yet, or is it a duplicate? We got a lot of duplicate reports. And it's not a huge burden, and it's just, making sure that we have two systems that can talk to each other.
Sure. So have you developed some sort of a policy that at the end of the day, after you reconciled everything, if you don't find a report to match, a pathology report or pathologist sends a report in and there isn't one from the physician, what's the step then that takes place after that?
We would call either, depending on who is missing, we call the provider that was supposed to submit that. And on occasions where that has happened, for instance, a hospital, it's been just frankly an oversight on their part. So we're if they cannot produce the form, is there a penalty, or is there, for some reason, I think, we went down this road because there was a, released video that this was taking place. And part of this is a way to close that loop. So if you did find that you cannot, there's a missing link, and let's say the pathology report was the part that was missing, then, and they can't reproduce it, they can't find it, they can't provide it to you, it doesn't seem like it really occurred, then what is the next? Well, you have to understand at the department, our hook is licensure. And we license hospitals and we license ambulatory surgical centers, but we don't license pathology labs per se. And so, if it's a hospital, and we haven't come across this, everybody's been very cooperative when we reach out to them. But if it were a hospital and they, and there was some failure on their part, refusal to comply, et cetera, that would probably have bearing on a licensure issue for them. They'd have to reconcile.
But there's not really I guess, the worst case scenario is that some sort of, trafficking took place, and we're able to find that the reports that we need, then reveal, they're not there, so they reveal it. Does that go, we make note of that in their licensure, and is there much of a penalty for that then?
Well, I want to make sure that you understand that the pathology report contains very little information, and the pathology report is just not created or required in such a way that I think it could ever yield evidence that something horrific, or untoward has happened. And so we don't have, based on the information we receive both from the abortion provider and from the pathologist, we just don't have information that would put us anywhere close to a trail of finding something like that.
Okay. Let me ask you one more question then. Dr. Miller had said that he had a lapse in turning in his pathology reports. And so going forward, it sounds like you're putting something into place that would be able to catch that.
Yeah, I should have mentioned, I appreciate it, Madam Chairman. I should have mentioned the other thing is, we have historical data on how many reports of each kind that we get per month. And so it's one of these things where if all of a sudden we go from 400 to 50, somebody's going to go, wait a minute, what's going on? And in fact, it's even, there are some kind of, you can kind of see it weekly a little bit, where if you saw a week where usually we get 10 a week or 50 a week or something like that, and we got 0, hey, is there something going on? But we now have processes and systems in place to be more sensitive to that if there were to be a lapse.
So did you find, looking back, how could this have occurred where those reports weren't being sent in and it wasn't identified that they were not being received? How did that happen?
Well, I can't remember if, from Dr. Miller's perspective, he's required to send one report to Planned Parenthood in St. Louis and one report to us. And I don't know what happened there that caused.
What happened in the department, though, that they didn't recognize that those reports weren't coming in?
Yeah, there wasn't anything that we could pinpoint or identify that happened or didn't happen that allowed that lapse to occur. But the one thing I can tell you is that what we discovered there just wasn't that much oversight of those reports coming in, and now there is.
Can you give us a little bit more detail? I know you talked about the process a little bit, but so who's in charge of that oversight? Where does that oversight, come from? Who will be in charge of that?
It's our Bureau of Vital Records, birth certificates and death certificates, that section. They receive other information too, including pathology reports. And so they're going to be working with, on their own and with our epidemiologists to make sure that the abortion reports and the pathology reports are matching up.
Thank you. I think Representative Lauer was next.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, sir. And this is a question really for my clarification, if you could help with that. And it's in regards to process. So as specimens are sent to pathology or particle entities, I should say, are sent to pathology and so forth, at what point does the HIPAA integrity kind of end for the patient and begin for the parts that are being sent to pathology? And how does that whole thing work, just as far as that confidentiality and all of that?
Well, two things I would tell you, Representative. First off, both the abortion report and the pathology report, and they're prepared, of course, by separate people or entities. Neither of those have any patient identification on it, other than a number randomly assigned by the facility who did the abortion. The other thing is that in Missouri law, all those reports are confidential, and it's a misdemeanor to disclose them. Whether it's the department, whether it's the pathologist, whether it's the abortion provider, it's a misdemeanor to disclose those reports or the contents of them. So that's pretty strong protection compared to HIPAA in particular.
And I would go back to Representative Bratton's line of questioning. Is that standard practice then across healthcare?
To have a criminal, I'm sorry, to have
a
a
misdemeanor and that sort of thing?
I'm not, I don't believe so. I mean, this is, and again, that's limited to the abortion reports and pathology reports resulting from abortions, that we have that provision in our state's laws. And I've not heard of that, I don't believe, with respect to other types of medical procedures, and I don't know if that exists in other states either.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Hager.
Thank you. I just want to clarify something that I thought you said earlier. You said the St. Louis Planned Parenthood Clinic was not receiving pathology reports, or was not sending them, or what was your comment about what was not happening in St. Louis?
Well, I'll tell you, the way it's supposed to work is that the pathologist, when he or she is finished doing the examination, writes a report and sends a copy to the facility that submitted the specimen, in this case, the Planned Parenthood Clinic in St. Louis, and also sends a copy to the State Department of Health and Senior Services. My understanding is that Planned Parenthood in St. Louis was still receiving the reports from their pathologist. It was the link between the pathologist and the department that was severed.
So whose responsibility is it to get it from the pathologist to the department?
It's the pathologist's responsibility.
So Planned Parenthood really wasn't being irresponsible and not sending reports because that's not part of what they're required to do?
I don't believe so. I don't think there's anything.
Yes or a no, or, that's right. So they have no, as long as they're receiving a report, it's not up to them to make sure that the department receives their report.
Correct.
Okay. Another question I have is, the reason we're all here on this subject was because of the videos that were made about selling baby parts. The report that you received from the pathologist, I understand is just male, female, gestation, and date of the procedure. Is there any information that you're receiving on these pathology reports that would indicate anything other has gone on than just an abortion, and here is everything that was included in that abortion?
No, and there isn't. And I think the reason why is because the law requires that a representative sample of tissue be sent to the pathologist. And I think the practice may vary throughout the state in what is considered a representative sample. And what I mean is that my understanding is that sometimes, and maybe even most of the time, all of the tissues that result from the abortion are sent to the pathologist, as opposed to just a sample.
That's not law for that to
No.
happen.
No,
You have no way of knowing if all or some are being sent to the pathologist when you get that pathology report.
correct.
There's no, okay, so we're gonna go to all this trouble to reconcile procedures and pathology reports, but we still haven't closed the loop as to what happened.
Right, because there's no requirement that the pathologist, when the pathologist just basically says, here's what was there. And there's no requirement that I'm aware of that says, here's what a representative sample means. And so you could have a pathology report that just reflects a small sample of tissue. And you could have the next pathology report that comes in that reflects all of the tissues. And of course, the pathologist, I believe, examines everything that he or she gets. And when the law says send a representative sample to a pathologist, it doesn't specify what that means. So in the end,
We decided we're gonna have a policy in place where we're gonna reconcile records, procedure, and pathology report, but we still haven't addressed the reason this is all being discussed today.
in terms of making consistent what is sent to a pathologist, no, because that's a state law that says representative sample. And
Okay, thank you.
Representative Allen.
Joan Clark, you may. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to follow up with Representative Haefner's concerns. So it doesn't say if this baby had been dismembered, parts of the body had been removed for the process, or a cranial incision made or something like that. Would it be helpful if the term representative sample was better defined to point out certain possible techniques of how this abortion was carried out?
to be honest, I don't. I guess depending on what your aim is.
Well, I'd want to know the whole baby was there, unfortunately.
Well, then, yeah, then you could say, send all of the tissues that are obtained in the process of the abortion to the pathology lab for pathological examination.
If the concern had to do with what was received from earlier this year, that would be an indicator to clarify whether or not any of that parts of that baby a given baby were taken and, used inappropriate, if there is an appropriate use.
I just don't know enough about what goes into a pathological examination to know whether or not a requirement such as you're suggesting could lead anybody to conclude that portions had been.
Do you know of, is this representative, or this term representative sample, is this consistent with what other states have?
I don't know. I can check into that.
That might be a good thing, if you can find that out.
Sure.
Come back. Thank you.
Representative Bratton.
To briefly inquire. But I think we're all following on the same, concept of questioning. That would be my question is, should we basically line out per gestation period, a checklist, basically almost an autopsy of what's exactly, here, and make that. Is that something that you think could shore this up? I mean, I get the representative sample when we're talking about, say, somebody getting a liposuction procedure or something of that nature, because it's all consistent tissue. This is different because it's all different types of tissue. So I think that's almost, I think, why we're here, is because it is so big. And what we heard in the videos is that it was an untapped resource in St. Louis, because I can see by the language that you're even saying is that it is so big that there's no ability to really vet that. So I did want to say thank you for answering questions of this nature, and from what we had previously encountered, this has been very informative. But I did have another question in regards to, we had some kind of debate on after the pathological report and all that is done, the disposal of the human remains. Now, does that fall within the Department of Natural Resources hands, or where do they go after pathology report, after it's all done? Where do they go?
Yes, I know the Department of Natural Resources plays a role in that, insofar as they license waste handlers. And I don't know with enough specificity what is required for different kinds of biomedical waste by DNR, but the understanding that I have is that medical providers and pathology labs all have appropriate contracts to have waste disposed of. And I don't know if that's sensitive down to, when you're talking about human remains, what specifically is done with them or not. But I just am aware that whether you're talking about hospitals or a doctor's office or anything, entities have contracts with certified licensed waste haulers.
Okay. Because that's my concern. I mean, why we're here is the body parts ability to sell. And after a report, all of a sudden, well, we have no clue, what the end product is, or in disposal or destruction of.
I will tell you, though, that the other thing that we know is that for preservation purposes, formaldehyde or another preservative is usually used, and the tissues are immersed in that, which my understanding, and I defer to a medical professional, my understanding is that renders those tissues unusable for other purposes other than examination.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Representative Newman.
Yes, Director, I've got a couple of questions. First of all, do you receive any other pathology reports from any other medical entities? Are you required to by law?
I'm not sure about that. I have not heard of it, but I will check into that and see.
So only Planned Parenthood and the pathology labs that deal with abortion tissue are the only ones that are required, you think,
But any abortion provider.
to submit to you a pathology report?
Yeah, the pathologist that they send the sample to has to then submit.
So any fertility clinics that also deal with fetal tissue are not required to for your knowledge.
Right, the requirements I was talking about are based on abortions.
Okay. And no other surgical centers need to send you any type of pathology labs?
I've not heard of it, but I'm going to check into it.
Okay. And the second question is, you know, we now we're into the point where this committee is actually, you know, talking about things that should be referred to in terms of medical terms. Does your department use the practice of accurate medical terminology when you're discussing, you know, these type of issues, or what's the practice in your department?
I'm sorry.
Do you use acceptable medical terminology when we're dealing with medical terminology is what I'm asking, because this committee isn't doing that.
Okay, I mean, yes.
You have an attempt to do that, okay.
But we have doctors and nurses and epidemiologists and academic folks who work in our department, and yeah.
And you basically deal with medical terminology?
Yes.
Because you're working with medical people, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Secondly, you also, I'm not sure, did your department actually receive the report from Missouri Attorney General finding, you know, based on any allegations that were out there, that there was no wrongdoing in terms of fetal tissue that was being donated or being, you know, sold? These are, again, allegations, or disposed of correctly. Did you receive that report from the Missouri Attorney General?
Yes.
And do you abide by that? Do you believe in his report? Or do you have questions?
I mean, the department did a similar, not as extensive, but a similar examination and found no evidence to suggest that
there was any wrongdoing.
there was any wrongdoing. So I don't know that abide by is the right term, but
you came up with the same conclusions.
We don't disagree, I guess I would say, with his report.
Or your department came up with those same conclusions.
Yes.
Correct, that there was no wrongdoing. I know there's been some references here that there is a video that this committee is referring to. And I want to point out in this hearing that this video also, and I believe that we're all talking about the same ones, has already been proven as being highly edited, highly deceptive, with undercover actors. It's already been proven that these were fraudulent claims. We also know that there was a congressional hearings this past summer and fall, and they came up, their own chair deducted that there was no evidence of any law broken in this specific video. And to go on, the organization responsible for this video now is is being investigated in federal court because for criminal conspiracy in terms of how they obtained any of their private data or images. So I just want to put that out there as a record in this committee that we're talking about something that's already been debunked and already been proven as been fraudulent. So any claims that I think that this committee is making, and even asking you, referring to something, we need to know up front that this is a fraudulent edited video. And again, Missouri Attorney General found no wrongdoing, but I want to thank you for, I would prefer that this committee would continue to use medical terminology. You know, we're dealing with you, and you said many of your employees are medical professionals, and I would think that would be the way that this committee should proceed. Thank you.
Representative Bratton.
Just to briefly follow up, Madam Chair.
Yes, you may.
You know, we heard the findings of the Attorney General as well. You know, but we just went through questioning how we have a loophole that we have no way to determine what exactly a pathologist is receiving from these organizations, correct? I mean, isn't that what we just covered, that the loophole, that a representative sample, so we're really not able to find out if they're receiving all human remains from an abortion clinic. Isn't that what we just covered that? Correct?
Yeah, I think there's, you know.
So if there's no ability by your testimony, what you just gave, that what the current process is to find out for sure if you're obtaining all specimen, which you even said that we are not, how can we honestly even answer that there is absolutely no way of a black market of human remains? And you said you worked in the Attorney General's office for years, and I'm sure you did an outstanding job. And I have many people that I know that are within police departments, and actually have a family member that's an undercover, officer, and they always wear wires and things like this. And when they go before a court of law, they may have several hours of continuous feed, but they must edit to get to what the incriminating evidence is. So, I hear that things are heavily edited, but when we're able to see the actual evidence within that video, I guess that's where I kind of draw a blank of how things are edited to specifically draw out the incrimination of the law breaking, and how we can say that's fraudulent is just absolutely beyond me. And I'm not trying to attack or anything, but I just, we just heard testimony that we have no way of tracking, and our process does not track the ability for these body parts. And then all of a sudden to hear that the Attorney General, well, the case closed. I'm kind of appalled by that. So I guess no response, but thanks.
Right, other questions, Representative Brown?
To inquire. Okay, I heard you say that in September and in October that you received 16,000 pathology reports that you didn't have in the past.
Yeah, it was either September or October, I think it was.
And I want to commend you for sitting down and making a process that wasn't there before to reconcile. And that makes me feel a lot more comfortable. However, the one statement you made did bother me a little bit when you said that it is not your job to monitor the pathology area, because that's not part of what you do. But it seems to me that if you have a company, or what do we call them? The center, whether it's Planned Parenthood or anyone else, if they have a pathology department or company that they're working with, and that company isn't doing what we expect to be done by law, then you need to have something that you can do, even if it's to go, maybe we have to have something in law that says, abortion center, if you have a pathologist that doesn't do the job, then you have to get rid of that pathologist. I mean, there's something that there has to be some accountability on that pathologist.
Yes, and I apologize, Representative Brown. I didn't mean, I want to make sure that I'm clear in what I was saying about the pathology laboratories. We don't issue them a specific license like we do with hospitals or ambulatory surgical centers. But certainly, yes, if there is an entity that we license and they deliver a service or achieve compliance through another party, contractor or whatever, of course, we want to make sure that they're achieving compliance or delivering the services they're represented they're going to be delivering. And so if we knew for a fact that there was some kind of lapse, then we want to see that rectified.
Okay.
Certainly.
So to continue your reconciliation process, so you're going to reconcile what Planned Parenthood does abortion-wise with the pathologist. How about reconciliation between the pathologist and what actually is sent to the disposal area? There's a reconciliation there too, that makes sure that everything that came here went there. That there's some process.
And again, we don't go several degrees out with our regulatory arm.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have an entity that we license to do whatever, and they do part of that whatever through a contractor, if they're showing that they're complying with Missouri laws and doing it through this contractor, that's fine. If there is a problem and they are out of compliance with what they're supposed to be doing, because their contractors failed, then yes, that oftentimes can and does go to the facility's responsibility. But in terms of getting a couple degrees, removed from that licensee, we just, I don't think.
So does DNR do that reconciliation? Should they be doing the reconciliation?
I don't know.
I'm just trying to figure out
Yeah.
if we're saying it's important to the state of Missouri that we know what is happening to those body parts, then it seems that it's important for us to know what's happening to them all the way down the line, not just stopping at this point and saying, well, we assume they're doing the right thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I get that. I get that. I'm just saying.
Not your job. That's fine.
Well, I don't mean to be pass the ball bureaucrat, but I mean, I also don't want to give our department more powers than we have, and I'm sure you don't want that either.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So this is kind of our dilemma that we're talking about here, is that if we were to try to have an accounting of a child that's been aborted, without, I mean, even leaving that child that's been placed in formaldehyde, sent on to the pathologist. But our quandary is that the best place to be able to make an accounting would be right there in the facility, right when the abortion is taking place. If there was some sort of a way to certify, what is here. And that's that's really what we are striving to figure out without adding. Do you have any ideas?
Sorry, Representative
No.
Neely was looking to be recognized. I didn't want to interrupt him.
No, that's fine. Oh, do you want a minute to think?
No, I was saying Representative Neely was looking to be recognized. I didn't want to interrupt him, but.
Yeah, that's our problem, is that, we have an inspection process, and we don't see in that inspection process at this point, there's nothing that helps us have that accountability that we're looking for, that assurance that we're looking for. When you move out to the pathology, I mean, you could catch something there, but sometimes the specimens are very small. You could move on to the disposal, and try to close the gap that they have to certify that indeed what they received, that it is what was sent to them. But the real, the real place to do this would be where the procedure is performed. And, if they were removing a leg and it didn't turn out to be a leg, there's a recourse, for that in the sense of a procedure. And if all the parts are supposed to be accounted for, there seems to be no recourse and real no way to determine whether or not they're all there. That's our quandary. That's our problem. So, do you have any ideas?
I don't. I mean, I frankly, this kind of along the lines of what Representative Bratton was asking, I would defer to medical professionals, and I'm not one, as to what the best way, methodology, purposes accomplished, things like that, would be considered. I mean, when it comes to licensing facilities that we license, we basically just call balls and strikes. I mean, we take a look at the facility. If they meet the requirements that we have in state law, there are some federal law requirements in some instances. Just make sure people are following the applicable laws. And but yeah, and I just don't, sitting here today, I don't have any grand ideas on that.
The inspection process, have you had a chance to look at that? I don't know that we've asked you to speak about that at all, but do you, has that been something that you've been able to look at, that process, how frequently they are, where we're at on inspecting?
Yes, I mean, the ambulatory surgical centers, all of them, are annual licenses. And in our division of regulation and licensure, we license hospitals, daycares, ambulatory surgical centers, home health, ambulances, EMTs, all sorts of different folks and entities. And we try hard to work with facilities. If it's a nursing home, we try hard to work with them because we need nursing homes. And so while we don't inspect every nursing home every year, we do our best, given the resources that we have. And the same is true for ambulatory surgical centers, including Planned Parenthood. But of course, there are only 2 in Missouri, and 1 that's not currently doing abortions.
And I think this morning they heard Senator Anders' bill, and I wasn't there, so I just heard Cole was there, and he said that I think there's been 8 inspections out of the last 14 years, 8 years, some sort of figure. It didn't seem like, gosh, there just hadn't been very many done. So would you find out about that and get that information back?
To make sure I understand the question, how many inspections of?
The focus of this is the Planned Parenthood facilities.
Okay. And of course, Planned Parenthood in Columbia wasn't licensed until July of last year.
St. Louis, so it's easy then.
Yeah. I'll check on that.
Okay. All right. We have another question. Representative Allen.
Clark.
You may.
Thank you. So 2 or 3 years ago, I did have someone in my office about the inspections from the Forest Park Parkway abortion clinic in St. Louis. And at that point, I was given questionable information that there had been some kind of a lawsuit going on, and people weren't giving me hard answers, but that the people from St. Louis City, they were saying that the state had to do it. And Brett, I think you were there in my office with Celeste. If you weren't there, okay. And I don't have my notes with me, but that the state people were saying that facility had to be inspected by the city people saying it was to be inspected by the state. So you're saying that that facility has to be inspected by the state of Missouri?
We're talking about an abortion facility?
In St. Louis City on Forest Park Parkway.
Yeah, now they may be, I don't know if there's an ordinance in St. Louis that requires that some local inspection occur, but if you're talking about an abortion facility, which has to meet the requirements of an ambulatory surgical center, that's us.
So there was a real easy way for people to pass the buck one versus the other, and I believe there had been no inspections, and there had been maybe a lawsuit by one of those. So you're not, and you don't have the history of having been around this this issue within health.
I mean, there was a lawsuit that was filed, but it was several years ago, and it had to do with the challenging the constitutionality of Missouri's laws.
Regarding inspections?
Yeah, regarding requirements for licensure.
Okay, I'll follow up with that. Thank you.
Representative Neely.
Inquiry, please. I might try to provide a little light on pathology and surgical reports. I don't know in this particular circumstance, but you know, when somebody has a gallbladder removed, there's an operative report and there's a sponge count all of the information put together. And so, but then that adult ladder is sent off to the pathologist, and the pathologist provides their information. And there could be a reconciliation between the two reports, the poverty report and the pathology report. And somebody can put that together and see if everything jives. So that's one perspective on trying to solve some of these issues. And I think the extent of how in-depth you want the operative report and how in-depth you want the pathology report. And so those would be issues to come to some kind of resolution of these issues.
Representative Brown,
To inquire.
you may.
I appreciate all that you've been doing, and since you've taken the helm there. I was just wondering, if we would put in state statute, law requiring that a pathologist make sure that all parts of the baby is, in their report, that's something you could make sure that it was done, or you could check that out on the report of the pathologist.
Yeah, when you said all parts of the baby,
Well, to make sure that there's no parts being sold, that all of it is that is accounted for.
that all of it goes to the pathologist.
Yeah. Would that be impossible, or would that be something we could do?
The hesitation that I have and that I expressed with regard to Representative Bratton's question is just, I don't know enough about the science to know if there are certain conditions that may explain the absence of particular organs,
Right.
for instance. And so you'd obviously want to make sure that is noted, and I would defer to medical professionals as to how to characterize that and provide for that. I mean, but yeah, I mean, if the pathology report contains more information than what it currently contains, we can handle that.
Because the way I'm saying it, 16,000 reports that you said were given, we really don't have any proof that none of this actually happened. And in the video, it does mention St. Louis in particular, St. Louis, Missouri. And, I've not seen any official reports saying that these videos were debunked. And anyone that are actually in the court of law, if they are in investigation, you're innocent until proven guilty. I have not seen anything, and someone might educate me on this, but I've not seen anything officially debunking what they said or any charges being filed for any of this. So that's why we're so concerned, and we want to get to the bottom of it and make sure that this isn't going on. Thank you.
Well, we have a number of abortion bills that have been filed to try to deal with this issue. So there'll be quite a bit going on about it. And I'm sure, we'll be consulting with your office as well to help us with anything that we need to be sure that we're on the right track. I think that we've made our concern, or that you're aware of what the concern is for us and how we are, trying to serve the people of Missouri the best that we can with this issue. I think whether or not folks agree with abortion, and I do not, but that no one thinks that there should be a property or a trafficking of unborn children for any purpose. So that's one of our focuses this session. So are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, let me see here. a little bookkeeping director. You need to fill out a witness form. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. If we really thought we were going to hear from the director today, and I hope it's been very informative for all of you. I think the committee will continue to grapple with this issue and have some, is the report out? We have a report from the interim committee forthcoming. It should be coming out about any time. And we'll move forward from there. So thank you all very much for your attendance today. We're adjourned.